This is Camille Essick. I am host of the Speaker Podcast. This is the podcast where innovators and creators connect. What I need you to do right now is to hit your notification bell and subscribe. We have a lot of things going on, you all. Before we get into everything, join us on Facebook at the Speaker Podcast. I'm on YouTube at Camille Essick Official, right there on Instagram at Camille.Essick. And I would love to hear from you. So you can also send me an email at the Speaker Podcast at gmail.com. And after tonight's show, we're going to release the May lineup. We have a lot of new faces coming through, some familiar ones, but new faces. I'm really excited to release that. That release will be exclusively first on the Speaker Podcast on our Facebook page, and then everyone else, you can catch that later. With that being said, we have a brother and friend here to the show. He is no stranger, but I figured what better way to wrap up the month of April to have my brother here. So the one and only Recodius O'Brien is back. Rico, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you.
Thank you. So what's been going on since the last time you were here? And also for those that are not familiar with you, let the listeners and viewers know who you are a little bit, what you do.
Okay, so the short of it, I am a minister, life coach, hairstylist, makeup artist, chef, and published author. I do all things, and most recently, I started a series for Black men called A Seat at the Table, where Black men are able to come and have conversation, good food, good fellowship, and real live conversation.
So I've been wanting to talk to you about Seat at the Table. So let's kind of jump into that first. Like, what is your inspiration behind it? When did you start it? Like, give us more about that.
So the inspiration was this. I was at a dinner party, and me and a gentleman was having a conversation in regards to Black men and not feeling safe to be able to have conversation as it relates to different things, right? And so that I began to mull over that, right? And so I was sitting at the table one day, and literally it was like I had a gut punch that said, "A seat at the table, a safe space for men to heal." And that was the beginning for me. And then I began to write down notes, and they were coming really, really quickly. A space where men can talk, where men can feel free. Not only that, but men could also hear another male's perspective about different things. And even after that, after the first one, God reminded me that I had a ministry that was dedicated to men. But I've not always had a good relationship with men, so I didn't know how that was going to correlate with me. You know, I met my father when I was 18. My godfather was my father until my father came into my life, and then I had both of them until I didn't anymore. And so it's really interesting that God would have me in this lane. I think I can say to that the very thing that you think was meant to hurt you can really grow you if you allow it to.
That's really good. And curating that space during this time with your father, your godfather, and then your biological father, what was in your mind at that time? And then how do you correlate that now into creating this podcasting space?
So what's interesting to me, I never, after a while, you become immune. At least I did. I became immune to the need for that male superstar, so to speak. When my father did come into my life, he was my favorite person in the world. So I knew that that was a void that had been there for a very long time, right? So I didn't worry about it. But what I did do was allow myself. A lot of people say, "Well, when your father came into your life, I did not know that you were. I didn't know that was your father, or I didn't know that you did." I said, because I made a decision. I decided that I wanted my father more than I wanted to be right.
Hmm.
And so, what does that mean? Is that um, I decided that I did not want to worry about what had happened as to why he wasn't in my life. But
Hmm.
what I wanted to do was to build upon what was there now. And that was what was important to me.
So, hey, Deshaun, how you doing? Um, so going into that and the healing process, how can you, and we're of course taking this from the perspective of a man going through that, the difference between having those past struggles show up in your present behaviors, transitioning from, feelings of an absentee father. Of course, you had your godfather to healing to wholeness. Like, how does that show up in your life in present behaviors? Or how can it in men when you have past struggles and they show up in your present behaviors?
Wow, that's a really good question, Camille. So I'll tell you this: the work continues; it doesn't stop. As I said, I made the decision that I wanted my father more than I wanted to be right. But here's the thing: while you're unpacking all of that stuff, you have to also unpack all of the days where you thought it was something you did, or that he didn't want me, or that he didn't want the responsibility of me. But I had conversations with my dad, real conversations that made me know that that wasn't the case at all. So what I had in the process of getting to the space of wellness, of wholeness, one, I chose not to be a victim. Two, I chose to allow it to make me as opposed to break me. Three, there were opportunities that my father and I had in the end where he was able to share with me the real, like what I had thought was wrong. And so having real conversations helped me to dispel any myths that I had, any thoughts I had that were not accurate. So, and my godfather was an amazing human. Like, my godfather loved me as if I was his own. And so therefore, when he came into my life at 11, I mean, did not know a time where he wasn't daddy. And when my father came into my life, he said, "Son, that's your father. I'm not going anywhere." He said, "Now you have us both." And so here's the thing. You asked me, how did I marry or get to where I am today as it relates to that, the healing that space. I took the time and doing the work, taking the time to do the work, that I don't fall into the stereotypes or to the patterns or behaviors that I saw or that I still see. I made a decision that I want to be an example and not a statistic,
Hmm.
if that makes sense.
It definitely does. And but in going through that, what about your unlearning coping mechanisms and life after being in survival mode? Because sometimes we can be in a space for chapters, seasons, or even most of our life where it's like you're just trying to get to the next day or just trying to make it or just trying to survive. But what about unlearning the things that helped us, but it's like now we have to unlearn those things that, yes, it was useful to us in those chapters of our life, but now we've got to make that pivot or a switch in our emotional mental state and unlearning those things and now going from just surviving to thriving. What does that look like?
So that's another really good question. You did your homework this time, and you always do. But these are very, very poignant questions. So here's the thing, right? Survival mode was created when you didn't know any better and you were grasping for the right way to do things. It's literally a space that the way the body is set up, the body heals itself over time. Like, if you're hurting or burnt, like, literally you will stop feeling the pain. You can see it, but while it's happening, you literally can numb yourself to the pain. Survival mode is that you've numbed yourself to the pain and decided, I don't want to deal with this anymore, right? But when you really want to become conscious about where you are, you can no longer live in survival mode. You've got to unpack the stuff that you have packed away that hurt you. You got to unpack that stuff and deal with it in an effort to understand that, hey, I don't have to live like that anymore. It's just like, and this is what I correlated to when you said it. Right now, you see a lot of cities trying to uh, handle the homeless population, right? So they want to give them housing, but they've got to work with their minds first,
Mhm.
because when they don't understand that this is yours and nobody can take it from you, they still go back to what they know, which is living outside or scrounging for shelter. So it's an unprogramming or a deprogramming of the mind to get to
Yes.
the space that you understand, hey, there is more. And that's really, really what it is. I thank God for books. As you can see, I got books all behind me because books allowed me to escape my reality and to see something different.
Hmm.
Books allowed me to travel past where I was and to see something different. And so, as long as I was able to see that there was an opportunity for more, it gave me hope for my own self.
That's good. And then I guess that ties into the next point as far as using your distractions to avoid healing versus sitting with yourself. A lot of people, particularly men, and this is where I really want to pull from the perspective of a man, um, digging into women or dating or education and making money and accolades and achievements and the gym versus sitting with yourself and your thoughts and having to look at you and look at the men in the mirror. And what does that look like from a male's perspective as far as doing that? Like, you know, achieving and performing and acquisition, all of these things to stay busy because if I sit still long enough, I have to listen to me.
Another really interesting question, because today there was a guy in the salon getting a facial. And so when the guy put the mask on him, he couldn't sit still because of his attention span. He was twitching and moving the whole time. And I said, "You're having a hard time being still, huh?" He's like, "Yeah." And I understand that space, because if you don't know peace, then you don't understand stillness and you don't understand quietness. And see, the pandemic, literally, people equate the pandemic as a season or a time of hell or whatever you. I honestly appreciate that time because it allowed me the time and the span of time to be still and to be
Yeah.
one with myself.
I had some of the best naps during the pandemic. Like, I know it sounds like what? Like, I had
No,
some
I
of
get
the
it.
best naps
But the
during
thing is, for me, it wasn't the naps. For me, it was the quietness, because the world was quiet.
that but yeah, but that's how I unplug. I nap and it was like it was good. It was a good
But
time.
this is what I've understood, and you
Yeah.
tell me what you think about it. This is what I understood. Yes, the naps were good, but the whole world was quiet. So it gave me
Mhm.
an opportunity to be one with myself.
Yeah.
We have become so desensitized to always filling our space with something. Most of us are anxious because we're on sensory overload.
Overstimulated.
We're ingesting so much. We're
Yeah.
taking in so much, whether it be X, formerly known as Twitter, whether it be IG, now it's Threads, and then you got Facebook, and you got
TikTok.
TikTok, and you got Reddit. You got all of these, excuse me, all of these different things that are supposed to quote unquote be entertaining, but what they're doing is distracting you from actually dealing with the things that you need to deal with. There's no way we can be whole for ourselves or for anyone else when there's always something filling the space.
Mhm.
If I am constantly in pursuit of what I can ingest, when do I ever have an opportunity to digest it?
Yeah.
When we
That's
go to sleep? And if most of the times we fall asleep scrolling, and then we wake up scrolling again.
but your mind doesn't get a chance to
Your
unplug. It's like
mind
your
doesn't get a chance
phone.
to recalibrate.
Yeah.
And recalibration is when you stop, assess where you are, decide where it is you want to be, and then take the action or the steps to get there. We literally are living in a time where the reason I believe this with my whole heart, most of us are so anxious and are on medication because of all of the things we're ingesting. We don't take the time to breathe. We rush
Detox.
in, we rushing everywhere we need to get to because everything is an appointment, everything is a commitment. But what if I don't have that today?
Yeah.
My new thing is, if I have the capacity, then I can. But if I don't, I can't. And I don't feel bad about that anymore.
Yeah. That's good. And just
'Cause
a
if you
detox from the junk, like taking
detox
social
from your
media
junk,
breaks
like
and
yeah.
yeah, today I've done this the last couple of days this week where I've been in my office and like you said, sensory overload, being overly stimulated. And as the weather's getting nicer, I said, "You know what? I need to get out of here." So I've been leaving the office and I found a quiet space. And so for 30 to 45 minutes or sometimes a whole hour, quiet. And it's so good because I'm able to refresh, reset, clear my mind, and just kind of just breathe. And I'm not calling anybody, I'm not texting anyone. Um, just quiet for at least 45 minutes. And it really makes a big difference. And in being more intentional about my evenings as far as how I keep my atmosphere here, in my residence, as far as okay, TV off by a certain time.
Mm,
Like yesterday, I don't remember even watching TV because I just wanted to just kind of enjoy my space.
right.
I ordered a book from Amazon. I posted it on my page. It's called As a Man Thinketh. And just having those little things just to find another space, another way to reset my mind and saying, okay, enough of this for right now. Let's do something different only because I need that. And so I totally agree with you on those things because it's imperative that we do debunk the junk, journal, read, walk, meditate, pray, but we have to fill ourselves with something other than that. So I totally agree with you on that.
Let me tell you what I recently heard. Um, and it's weird. But I heard someone say I wasn't getting enough nutrients from my joy.
Mm,
And so what does that mean? I the things that God has given me that are supposed to make me happy, right? They're not giving me the nutrients that I need. And so therefore I am looking elsewhere. But they were given to me to get joy, meaning my work, the things that I'm passionate about, my family, the things that I'm passionate about. And yet, opposed to me getting joy from that, it too feels like a hardship. And so I have to start now reassessing, am I over pouring? Am I doing too much? Do I need to allow myself an opportunity to refill in an effort for me to be able to go forward? Because let me tell you something, there is nothing more useless than an empty vessel. And so now I'm looking for nutrients in my joy every single chance I get. So what does that mean for me? I love to wake up and hear the birds chirping. That is one of my favorite things about my day is that I wake up and I can my body normally wakes up naturally about 6:04, but if I'm not awake, I'm listening. If the birds are chirping, I know I could potentially have overslept.
mhm. Do you find it now in our society now as far as the narratives and what they say how men should show up, how to do so without apology and still be who you are as a man? Because we hear about the Superman complex, like, you got to save the day and be the guy and be the man all the time, but in reality you may feel like Clark Kent. So how do we um continue to still uphold the brothers in our community, but say, okay, sir, you can take off the cape today. It's okay.
Um, so I wrote a book, and one of the chapters is called Superman, and the chapter opens like this: Today I found myself buried underneath all of the paraphernalia, the weapons, the swords, the shields, the guns, the knives that I've used to save the world. Today I realized the one who needed saving was me. So when you say that question, you ask the question, the Superman complex. The only reason why anyone would have a Superman complex is because no one came to save them. Because so they feel like they have to show up in every space supernaturally, right? And so with that being said, for me personally, I show up fully authentically as myself every single day because I am a man. No one can take that away from me. I don't care what your thoughts are of me. You can't take that away from me. That's one of the things that I've learned. I may not look like you think I should look or not say the things you think say things, but I am a man. And the thing about it is, I strive every single day to show up fully for myself. If I show up fully for myself, it's natural for me to show up for you. But I had to get to the space that I understood who I am. I am a man, and whether or not I show up the way you see me, because your perspective may be skewed. But let me tell you something that you probably know. A man wants to protect, provide, and to pacify. If he doesn't feel like he can do those things, then he feels useless. But I'm here to debunk that myth. Why in the world do I have to show up to pacify you or protect you or to provide for you when I myself am in a struggle? See, we put all this emphasis on what a man is supposed to do, but as your partner or your mate, are you not supposed to be a helpmeet or a helpmate? As a friend, am I only supposed to be the one that shows up, or do we show up for each other? See, what I've come to understand is a man is not afraid to say it hurts or I'm uncomfortable with that. Or you don't get to speak to me in that manner because respect is huge to me. So because you don't see me as a man, does that mean you get to disrespect me? No, it doesn't. It means that you and I if I ha- that's where we understand boundaries are necessary. And if I need to set a boundary for you, then I will.
That's good. And then going into our next point, Recodius, as far as coping versus addressing issues, I guess it's kind of just tying together. Um, how dangerous is it when we fail to conquer our then, and that failure results in struggling in your now?
It, I think what's important for us to our takeaway, um, if nothing else that I say tonight lands, understand that you don't get to discount what has happened to you.
Mm,
I don't care how much you try to store it. I don't care how much you try to stick it or put it away. It happened, and it is going to have a voice until you acknowledge it. That's the thing. Now, that was a tool that wasn't given to me. And that's a tool that I've had to learn and embrace. I've had to learn that it's okay when I'm uncomfortable, but say, hey, that doesn't feel good. I've had to get comfortable with saying, hey, you don't get to talk to me that way. So coping is a defense mechanism or a trauma response when in reality, this new generation, this current generation, they don't deal with nothing they don't want to deal with. They can go to lunch and decide, I don't like this job because I don't like the way you talk to me. And they'll send their resignation email.
if you get that, they might just leave and not
They
show
may
up.
just leave and never show up. So what am I saying to you?
Yeah.
Coping is literally dismissing or discounting the opportunity for you to be well or for you to manage it. And I don't know where that come from. Oh yeah, I do. That adage, stay in a child's place. There are many of us as adults that are still in a child's place.
Mm.
There are many of us that are adults that are still in a child's place.
I call it
Which,
emotional bookmarking. Like, you can have a trauma
yeah.
and it can I call it emotional bookmarking, meaning it pauses you intellectually, emotionally, even spiritually in that chapter. If it was traumatic enough, some people don't maturate past the age of trauma if it was at 16 or 23 or whatever, and you can be 55 years old, but emotional you is still 17.
Have you ever spoke to someone and you heard the kid come out? Like
Oh,
they
yeah.
resorted back to they talking the baby talk, or they started whining, or because that child is still waiting to be acknowledged. That child is
Feed
still
me,
waiting
hear
to
me,
be
love
heard.
me, hug me, listen to
Yeah,
me.
yeah. See me. And it's so crazy because as I said that, I literally several persons popped in my mind, and I used to always say, "Why does they resort to this baby talk?" oh, that little boy, that little girl have yet to come forward, or you've not acknowledged them, and so therefore they're screaming for attention. So the question was coping or managing, right?
Just pretty much like coping versus addressing the issue, which goes
Yeah.
back into unlearning those coping mechanisms. Because, like we were saying before, you may have picked up coping mechanisms to get you through a season or a chapter of life, but now here you are, you're not in that situation anymore, but you're still operating. It's like you're physically here, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, a part of you is still back there.
So let me tell you what's interesting about that statement or that sentiment is that we are not built to suppress or not address things. We were built to manage the things. Cyclic abuse has caused us to be calloused, so we're not made to feel. What am
Mhm.
I saying? When you've been constantly in a state of trauma or repressed trauma or oppressed trauma, you don't get an opportunity. You've never had an opportunity to express how it made you feel. So it's literally you've become immune to it. And so as opposed to you understanding that's not how it's supposed to be. Because even if you have a callus, you don't get well until you do what?
Gotta remove it.
You can remove it or cut it away. And I can tell you, I can name hundreds of people, especially church people, that are calloused over. That's why they're stoic and they don't have any emotion or they don't have any expression of emotion because they've not been able to feel. And that space where their heart was is hardened over.
I think just culturally too, just us as Black people in this country, when we look at systemically what we've gone through, historically what we've gone through within our communities, and even down to the macro micro level with our families, there's so many layers to that trauma, and hurt and pain. And then I look at, like our conversation tonight as far as perspective as far as how it impacts our Black men, and looking at that when we look at systemic racism for Black men and genderism through the prison system and returning citizens after they've gone to jail or just showing up and going to the store. We see what our little boys, our little Black boys and girls go through in classroom situations. There's so many layers. So when you get to an adult status, look at how many things, our kids go through by the time they're 21, just being Black and in this country. And then you add on home issues, if there was some type of abuse, molestation going, there's so many layers you have to break through. And then going through all this, and you wonder, did anybody see me when I was 7 years old? Why didn't anybody notice me in that situation when I was 14? Like a teacher, a principal, someone from church, someone in your community. And so there's this internal voice that says, well, I got me, air quotes. I just have my own back, and I can't worry about, this person and that person, and becoming insensitive to the emotional, spiritual needs of others, and that callous builds in because it's like, well, nobody was there for me. But Recodius, how is that cycle broken for men to say, "Hey, young man, I see you," even though I didn't have that, like with your godfather, him stepping in and seeing, "Okay, little Rico didn't have a dad. Even though he's not mine, let me show up for this young man."
That's a
Because
really
we hear a lot of people that say, "Well, that's not my kid." We're all someone's sons and daughters. I listen to, Dr. Anderson sometimes, and he said that he talks about, wealth within the community outside of just Black people and money, but how we're wealthy in spirit and how we operate. And he said one of the things as far as into wealth, not Anderson, Dr. George Fraser, he said every Black man should mentor at least one boy. Like, can you point to one young boy that you've mentored in your life? Because that's a part of legacy. We always talk about legacy as far as just a dollar, but no, legacy is, the virtue, the wisdom that you pour out. And like with your godfather, his legacy is you, because although he's not biologically your father, but look at the legacy he left for you in manhood.
Yeah. And and I pray we can stay in the center lane today, and we're not going to go out to the, because we do have, we send this.
No, but I definitely wanted to
I'm,
highlight
I'm,
the
I'm
point.
gonna
Yes.
share with you. Here's the thing. Again, I could have focused on what I didn't have, as opposed to seeing the gift that was in front of me. Right. I literally, when I began to call him daddy, and he began to refer to me as son, I understood that God was sending me the ram in the bush. So what I want you to understand is this: yes, we are to reach out and grab someone and take them along the way, or to show them a way. But here's the thing: we can't focus on what has happened. What we can focus on what is, and what is right now. What am I saying to you? I want you to understand that God has sent someone that is there for you. Every boy that I get opportunity to meet or speak to, hug on, I tell them, hey, I love you, man. Tell the boy, hold your head up. The only time you should bow your head is if you're praying. I mean, literally, like, even with my nephew, I can call him and say, hey, uncle loves you. And he'll say, I love you back. I am showing him now how to respond to love, how to respond to emotion. One of the things that I had to learn, and I learned this in the last few years, kids can't express or tell you what they're feeling. Most times they cry or act out because they can't say, I'm traumatized, because they don't know what that means. But what they can do is try to get your attention. And you, as the adult or the elder, should be able to look at them and say, or figure out what it is, if you've dealt with your own stuff. But
Or they go inward. They can go inward too.
or they can go inward. And if you've not done with your own stuff, done your own stuff, you're not going to be able to look at them and say what's wrong, because you yourself are waiting to be healed. You yourself are waiting to be acknowledged. We do have a responsibility to the generation, to the young men and women that are coming behind us, to show them what we've learned. But I can tell you that there are not enough of us evolved enough to show them. We're so busy hoarding what we've got now that we're afraid to share it.
But that's where, we have spaces like the Speaker Podcast. We're innovators and Critics Connect, and we open up the space for people to share their journeys and their experiences, because you never know. That one conversation could be life changing for someone. It could be the domino for someone to pursue their healing, whether if it's spiritual or just um, through therapy. And here we talk about everything. We do talk about, business, entrepreneurship, but we also have conversations like this as well. And I think it's very important, just because as creators, those that work in creative spaces and innovation, a lot of people don't understand. We experience life, we perceive, we process things very differently than others. Um, I won't say we overanalyze, but we tend to kind of look at it from a different vantage point, if I can say that. And a lot of times, in that, there's a pouring out that comes with it. And so when we recharge, it may look like, oh, they're being standoffish or they're inaccessible. But a lot of times we have to kind of pull back because of how we pour out, the way we pour out. And if you have any type of discernment, you also have to be in a protective space because of how we do pour and how we receive downloads. We have to do so in a way that there's no interference. And that's where those boundaries come up. But we also can be very sensitive to things because of how we perceive and process. So we can also be viewed as quirky, but in all of those things, we're still people. We still have feelings. We still have dreams and goals. We just move a little differently. So, with me having the podcast here, my goal here is to create a safe space for creatives and those that have an innovative mind, where we can communicate and share our views and perspectives on life and things that are impacting the community and the culture. So, you're one of those people, and I'm glad that you're here, Recodius, excuse me, to share your journey with us, because it's very important to have men speak up and in these spaces, and that can do so in a way that's safe, you know? And with you starting a seat at the table, I do want to tap into that a little bit more as far as what has the reception been like since you started this whole new space for brothers?
Man, let me tell you. First of all, the inaugural one was in February, and I ended up with the flu, so it didn't happen the initial date that I set it. So it happened a few weeks later. I literally the next day, one of my friends that came, he said, "I don't know if you know how big this is about to be." And I was like, "Okay." And so then the next day, I began to just like think about the conversations that were had. There was so much honesty and transparency. Men from all walks of life, men who are professionals, men who are creatives, men who, and we had, and so the way a seat at the table works is that I prepare a meal for them, and we come and we eat and we fellowship, and then we grab a cocktail or juice or wine, whatever your beverage of choice is, and I have a bowl of topics or words that I put in the bowl, and each person grabs a word and we all expound upon that word. And so in the inaugural one of the words was little boy. And when I heard that each person had just recently met their little boy, or they were just recently coming in contact with their little boy, meaning the inner child that had never been addressed or never been dealt with, it was so refreshing to find out that I wasn't the only one. We talked about church and church hurt. We talked about grief. Um, and, it's like it's all of the things that we are not given the space to expound upon.
Mhm.
And generally, so the first one, they was like, "Did you not make dessert?" And I didn't, because I'm not a dessert person. I mean, I bake, but so I ended up making a cake at 10:30 at night because they didn't have dessert. The next one was just as impactful. Um, Great fellowship, and each person that comes really leaves with a gift as well. Um, so great fellowship, great interaction. One of my friends who recently moved back to Atlanta, he came. He said, "I didn't come here for this. I just came to eat. What is this?" I said, "Well, welcome." But what we do is we make everyone feel safe in their, whatever they're feeling, whatever their process is, and we envelop them with sincerity that, hey, we've all gone through it, or with now. That's what makes it safe. And I think what's interesting to me is that I never saw me as the leader of anybody's male perspective.
Mm.
But now that I'm of a certain age, and I understand why it had to happen. There were certain things that happened because they were supposed to. They were supposed to prepare me for this.
Mhm.
So a seat at the table it happens every 6 weeks. I send out an invitation this month. It's happening on Monday, the 29th. Everyone was encouraged to invite a person because they said to me, "We don't want to just keep this to ourselves. Can we invite someone?" So this month, people are inviting someone. So prayerfully, there'll be enough food and there'll be enough gifts for everyone. But I'm excited because it's one of the things, just like looking forward to your podcast, it's one of the things that I enjoy. Um, Even though it's work, I enjoy it because it gives me an opportunity to see where the gaps are, what's missing, what men need, and to hear it. Here's what's beautiful to me every single time. I get messages days after. "Oh my God, yesterday's conversation was amazing. Golly, thank you so much for creating this space for us." People literally like, "When is the next one? When is the next one? What is this?" People are asking me in the streets, "Well, what is the seat at the table?" And I share with them, and I'm proud to say it's something that I birthed, but God is really He's going to get the glory from it. He really
That's
is. Like I,
great.
I, I don't, I don't have, I can't even like literally. I don't in my finite mind the capacity from which it is in being impactful. I didn't know it was there.
That's great. We've covered so much, and um, I definitely want to bring you back for sure. Before we wrap things up, what may be like a takeaway, a nugget, or a gem that you can leave for the listeners and viewers? Also, where can people contact you on social media? Every time you come here, you leave so many gems and nuggets on the table. So, what may be one thing from this conversation you feel that people really should take with them?
Understanding that I know it happened to you, but it didn't happen to you, it happened for you.
Wow.
Oftentimes we spend our energies on, God, why me? Why did that have to happen? My question today is, God, what am I supposed to learn from this? How am I better? What do you want me to take away from this so that I can be better? How I can show up better? As opposed to me being, woe is me. I heard somebody say, wow, it's me. It's a whole different perspective. You understand? So it's not, it's sort of, woe is me. It's, wow, God, you chose me for this. And it's me and I'm here. And that's where I'm at. Like we have to, I know that things happen. Trauma is real and it lives, but trauma was for a moment. The incident was for a moment. The trauma lasts a lifetime if we don't deal with it. I read that the other day, and that literally changed my mind and the trajectory of my thoughts. That trauma it happened. It was an incident, and it's over. But the residue of it is choking you and choking the life out of you right now. How long will you give that thing, those few moments, the power to change your life? Take your power back.
Man, that's good.
Take your power back.
That's really good. Hey, cousin Candy. Um, what's a saying that your past does not dictate your future? It's only a point of reference.
Yeah.
And I say that all the time. And it's so interesting that we're having this conversation on trauma. Um, and it's so timely. I had a conversation with a close friend of mine, and I said something because right now my pastor, he's doing a series on trauma, and I thought, man, the timing of him bringing up this Bible class series, I said I feel like I'm on the brink of the next level of my life, and I cannot put it into words. I cannot properly articulate it, but I can feel it. And to have this series come up now, I know it's because the residue, this cannot come with me. And
Yeah.
it's not about, "Oh, I'm whole." Like, no, no, I'm not being healed, but being whole. Like, it's not about being healed, it's about being whole. Whether if it's you totally, healing and being whole from someone that you love dying or things that happened in your childhood or a broken relationship or a loss, um, we can grieve quietly and not even realize that we're grieving. I call it grieving on the go, meaning that um, you've experienced loss, you've experienced trauma, things have happened, but instead of coping and dealing with those things, you start a business, you start a podcast, you write a book, you go back to school and get another degree, you travel, you do all of these things, but you never take the time to process the L. And then you're like, man, even no matter how much you achieve, a quiet of you is piece of you is sitting in a quiet space and you're like, hmm. And it's like, what is that quiet sadness? It's because you never gave yourself permission to grieve the losses. Like we celebrate all the wins, but when do we allow ourselves time to process the loss? And that hit me so hard last summer. And I was in a Zoom call with it was myself, Pastor Carrie, Dr. Carrie Turner, and about 20 other women. And we're just having like just this one-on-one conversation. And I had been experiencing this quietness for so long. And I was like, what is that? I could not put my finger on it. I felt very heavy, very weighty, didn't know why. But when she said it, she was like, "You're grieving." And she was talking to all of us in the group. She said, "You're grieving because by a certain age, you thought you were going to be married, you thought you were going to have kids, and so, or you thought your career would be at another level, or this deal that you wanted, whatever your it or things were, it didn't happen. So instead of dealing with those L's, what did you do? You achieved." And it was like the light bulb went off because now I have language to what I was feeling, and it was grief. It was grief. So much had happened, and instead of me, I'm fine, I'm going through it. No, Camille, you are grieving some things. And after having that conversation, it was like it shifted because now I understood what I was going through. And now in this season of life, I can recognize, like, okay, what are you grieving now? And it's like grieving the expectations I had for others that I thought at some point finally they're gonna show up, but having to realize they're not coming, Camille.
I
They're not coming. And so having to have like this internal funeral for and putting to bed, putting to rest things, time, situations, whatever, like I've been waiting for you and you're not coming. And just having to say, okay, they're not coming. And then saying, okay, now that you know they're not coming, processing those feelings. What comes with the stages of grief? Anger, denial, acceptance.
oh, it's a whole cycle.
It's a whole cycle.
So let me ask you a question. How much time we got?
We're here.
So listen,
This is a nice takeaway. It's a great way to close out the show.
yeah, it's a good takeaway. So let me tell you something. And this is where the great unlearning is for me. We are taught, oh, we believe God for it. It's going. Then it's done. But nobody talks about the process between the promise and the prophecy and the promise.
Malachi, Matthew, there's a whole space of
Don't nobody talk about that process
Yeah,
between the prophecy and the promise, right?
yeah.
And I heard something the other day. She said, "Wait well." We don't like to wait because we want it now. But here's the thing: if you didn't learn what you were supposed to learn in that process, you're gonna have to wait even if you get it. Here's what I want us to debunk: this whole myth that we can shout over it, we can speak in tongues over it, we can hallelujah over it, because that's not God. Even on the cross, he determined that if he could, he would ask God to take the cup away from him. He acknowledged the pain. He stayed and endured, but he acknowledged that that was uncomfortable. That's the thing. We've got to get comfortable acknowledging that it doesn't feel good. I don't like this. Now, what am I supposed to do with it? And how am I supposed to manage it? When we get to that space and we allow people to see that we're not superhuman or super Christians, then can God really use us? Because the brokenness is where the oil flows.
The
You can't
reality of
be
our
used,
divinity.
huh?
The reality of our divinity.
The reality of your divinity. You can't be used to making people think that you ain't got no feelings. You walk around looking stoic and mean and ugly. That's not the joy of the Lord. The joy of the Lord ain't your strength. It can't be. It can't be. You don't even look like it is. But here you are wanting to be a disciple for Christ, but you want to acknowledge that it's uncomfortable. You want to acknowledge that in this it's uncomfortable. Acknowledge that, God, I don't know what to do here. We've got to get comfortable saying, Father, show me how to manage this space. If that's what we're going to do. Because until then, we are broken vessels, sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. We've got to get used, because that's the only way you heal. You got to acknowledge that something hurt. You can't go to the doctor and say, well, figure it out. I'm just here. I know I'm uncomfortable, but I
And
can't
not
tell
just
you
say, oh,
why.
it hurts, but you have to pinpoint where it hurts.
Pinpoint where it hurt and acknowledge why it's hurting you. And then you get the victory over it.
Yeah.
Victory doesn't come just from screaming and shouting and saying, "Oh God, I thank you." Yeah. That can help it manifest quicker, but you got to acknowledge the space that you're in while you're in it.
Yeah, it's time to unpack and process some real things.
It's an
So
unpacking process. You moved into this house, meaning your spiritual house, a long time ago, and you still got boxes that you won't even open. But you dragging it around with you everywhere you go.
and it's
Why?
taking up space.
Taking up spiritual space and mental space and emotional space. It's taking up space.
So, as we wrap up, as a creative, when we don't address and unpack our things, that's a space that could be utilized for creativity and innovation. But it's
That's
like,
very true.
you ever see like, and you love horticulture, plants. If you have a plant and it's dying, that plant will source a lot of extra chlorophyll and other nutrients trying to heal that one leaf that's dying when in reality it should have just been cut off. So now those nutrients can be allocated back to the healthy leaves. So what are you gonna do? We gotta unpack it.
Or circumcise it.
That's why I said the leaves, you gotta cut it off.
We gotta cut the dead stuff off.
Cut the
We gotta
dead
cut the
stuff
dead
off.
stuff off. We have to allow what is life. Even when Christ was walking and he got to the fig tree, when was the last time it bore fruit? They couldn't tell
Yeah.
you. Cut it down.
Yeah.
Even the things in your life that are literally you're waiting for to bear fruit, male, female, chick, child, you waiting for it to bear fruit. There is none. Cut it off.
Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you got something from this conversation. That was a great wrap up of the episode. I know that people are like, "What are we watching here?" It's all right. Thank you.
I'm available
Oh,
for questions and comments though.
yes,
If you want to expound, you want me to expound, hit me up.
for sure. Where can people reach you on social media?
So on my business page, I am the Recodius O'Brien Experience. After the O'Brien is no E's, it's NXPERIENCE. Or my personal page at Recodius O'Brien. There is only one on either of my pages, the business or the personal page. There's only one Recodius O'Brien, and I thank God for it.
And we really appreciate you. I hope that those listening, watching, and tuning in, you got something from this conversation. If you missed it, you can catch the replay. Be sure to follow me on Facebook. We're at the Speaker Podcast on YouTube at Camille Essick Official, on Instagram at Camille.Essick. And you can also send me an email at the speakerpodcast@gmail.com. And after tonight's episode on our Facebook page, we're going to release our May lineup. We're very excited about what's to come. We've got some new faces, have some new conversations, and we're going to bring back a couple of familiar faces, but it's going to be a great time. Hold on right quick, Recondius. Thank you all. This is Camille Essick. I am host of the Speaker Podcast, the podcast where innovators and creators connect. Be blessed. Good night. Bye-bye.